Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the latest big scandal to hit Liz Truss in still her first month as Prime Minister, as the chief advisor, who was already attracting questions about being interviewed by the FBI over bribery and corruption investigation, turns out to be a lobbyist for private interests at the heart of government. Liz Truss has really gone for it this time. She's actually privatised 10 Downing Street. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So this is quite something. I was already talking this morning about the continually falling value of the pound. Tory MPs absolutely fuming after that mini budget last week. And they're not going to be happy about this either. In fact, they're not. Mark Fullbrook. So he's Liz Truss's chief of staff. He's her version of Dominic Cummings for Boris Johnson, basically. After he was interviewed by the FBI in relation to a bribery investigation, there were already questions about whether this man should be given the sort of security clearance that the chief of staff would need to do their jobs. Under more normal political times, he'd have resigned by now. Unthinkable that he'd carry on in post with such questions hanging over him. But it's worse than that. Turns out that Fullbrook isn't even employed directly by number 10. And no, he's not doing the job for free out the goodness of his heart. He is being paid, he has an income, just not from number 10, not from the government, not from public funds. His income derives from his own private company, which is a lobbying business. Fullbrook claims that he's stopped all commercial activities of the business as of the end of last month. So how's it paying him then? But the point is that he isn't being paid directly by the government for this government role. He's been paid by his lobbying firm. From his point of view, there'll be a tax fiddle in this, of course. From our point of view, Liz Truss has basically privatised the government. The position of Chief of Staff at 10 Downing Street has been contracted out to a lobbying firm. That's literally what's happened. Our government has been privatised in a very real sense. I don't think even Thatcher thought about doing that. Now, this is where the scandal started to grow. Liz Truss has appointed the owner of a lobbying firm to the heart of government. An incredibly powerful position, gives him access directly to ministers and policy meetings. And remember that a lobbying firm exists to connect their clients with the government. Its purpose is to win government contracts or get beneficial changes to or exceptions to regulations or laws for that company. It's a shady enough practice at the best of times. But then there turned out to be even more in it. Reports are now saying that Liz Truss persuaded Fullbrook to take the role in return for being given the job of running the Tories' next general election campaign. Now, this aspect isn't necessarily of concern to us, the general public, but it has upset a lot of Tories. Funnily enough, that's more serious. We've been used to blatant corruption on a massive scale with Boris Johnson, and no consequences suffered for the perpetrators. Whether you're talking about the illegal vote leave referendum or the dodgy VIP lane for COVID contracts, a quite breathtaking level of corruption and sleaze has never been far from the Tories over the last few years. But nothing happens. No criminal investigations because the government threatened funding for the Met Police or the National Crime Agency. The same is likely to apply to Fullbrook's potential role in a series in this bribery scandal, basically. Maybe Labour could shine a spotlight on it and get the public to take an interest and then public pressure. But I'm going to suggest with the acute cost of living crisis, I suspect that's what the public are interested in. I don't think there's very much scope for getting the public to be outraged at Fullbrook. But effectively defrauding your own MPs may have actual consequences. I mean, a lot of Tory MPs want Isaac Levidow to run their campaign after his successful work in 2019. As far as those MPs are concerned, Truss has struck a deal with no clear benefits to them and which in their mind might risk their seats at the next election. Not that Fullbrook's a strategic novice. He absolutely knows what he's doing in many ways. And like Levidow was a protege of the legendary right-wing campaign maestro Lynton Crosby, a man who has conned people into voting against their own interests the world over, including in this country in 2015. Fullbrook was also involved in the 2019 general election campaign, though he wasn't running the show, Levido was. That being said, he has also been involved in some pretty bad campaigns as well. It was pointed out that, he has run a campaign for the Tories before. He has been in overall charge of an election campaign for the Tories. It was Zach Goldsmith's campaign to become Mayor of London. It went very badly for them. Now, to be fair, Zach Goldsmith is a serial loser. They never should have had him as their candidate. So I'm not sure how much that should reflect on the campaign director. But as far as the Tories are concerned, the last time he ran a campaign for them, Labour was the winner. I saw a quote characterising it as abandoning a proven winner for a proven loser. And again, as with anything in politics, it doesn't matter how true it is or how accurate, it's the perception. And Tory MPs are already nervous. Consider the situation they find themselves in, just looking at it briefly. First, they're behind Labour in the polls. And although Labour were ahead in the polls under Miliband and still lost, the Conservatives always retained their poll lead for leadership and economic competence over Labour. When you drill it down, what do the public think on various issues? Leadership and economic performance, Labour were never ahead of the Tories. And those are the two most important factors for winning campaigns. Miliband never polled ahead of Cameron on either. But Starmer is polling ahead of both Tory leaders this year. That's ominous for the Tories. Second, their new leader is about as inspiring as dog poo on toast. The Tories used to try and paint Starmer as boring. Oh, he's boring. I mean, you could definitely draw a distinction with Boris Johnson there. He's absolutely not boring, whatever else he is. As if it's a drawback when it comes to political leaders. But there are only a few idiots on the fringes of the Tory party trying that line now. Liz Truss is a deeply dull individual. She doesn't even have the redeeming feature of being on top of her game or competent when it comes to things like, political debates or budget announcements. This is why she's dodged all debates since becoming Prime Minister, apart from one PMQs that she couldn't get out of. Third, they've been in power for over a decade. By the time of the next election, it'll be like 14 and a half years. It's getting quite hard now to blame the last Labour government for the mess the country finds itself in. They'll also be battling the concept of familiarity breeds contempt. Even decent governments will find themselves up against it when they've been in power for so long and the country just fancies a change. And this is very far from a competent government. What they need is the very best campaign strategist in the role, an absolute genius. They know they can't get Crosby himself, but they're very happy to see Levido in charge again because as far as they're concerned, he knows how to win. In fact, whenever I'm trying to be critical of the latest polling results, which currently have Labour winning a decent majority, I always sort of say, well, the Conservatives, when it comes to it, will pay for the very best campaign strategists available. Labour much more limited, partly because of funds, partly because it seems the best strategies are always amoral right-wing corporate champions, which I suppose makes sense. There's money in major election campaigns, of course, but the big bucks are in lobbying for massive corporations, winning them influence in the corridors of power of major economies and unlocking the doors to huge tax breaks and other beneficial policies. If you think Liz Truss is shredding her party's plans for climate change because she genuinely thinks it best, think again. She's doing it out of self-interest because you know what? When it comes down to it, when she eventually leaves office, which may be rather sooner, massive oil companies can pay her more in directorships once she's no longer Prime Minister than the RSPB or Wildlife Trust will. But if you sat there as a backbench Tory MP, you don't care about the fact that Liz Truss is on for a nice little earner once she leaves office. If you're sat there in one of the roughly 150 very vulnerable seats, you're thinking the next election is going to be really tough. But maybe with a strategic genius at the helm, maybe you can hold on. Even if your party loses, maybe you can just retain your seat. You're not going to welcome the news that the strategic genius you thought you were getting is going to be sidelined for someone whose only experience of being in charge of a campaign for the Tories was losing to Labour. Truss was already on a collision course with her backbenchers just over that economic statement last week. And this is not likely to divert it. It may not be an imminent bust-up, this particular one. The potential for the run on the pound is arguably much more urgent for Tory MPs. But, this could still add more pressure on Fullbrook to leave Downing Street in the next few months. They may well say, look, you need to get rid of him. And if Truss's agreement is only verbal, not written, then they could still get their preferred Levido to run the campaign. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join buttons for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.